I'm thankful to have been asked to participate in this conference. The information that we will discuss here as participants is rather crucial to our pastoral work as we move forward into the 21st century. The Church has always endeavored to meet the world where it is and to attempt to raise it to a higher spiritual level. In order to be successful at this task, we must know where the world is. And this is something the Church has always struggled with on some level. And perhaps we struggle with this in our days more than ever before. We live in the world while seeking to not be consumed by the world, and thus our ideas of the world can be imprecise. Such a conference, as we have the blessing to participate in today, helps us greatly in this regard. I myself look forward to learning much, as I am not qualified to be a teacher to those gathered here today by any means, but hope my small contribution will provide perhaps something useful to someone as we consider the important themes of our conference. I'm also thankful for this opportunity on another broader level. The reconciliation of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia and Moscow Patriarchate is something truly great, something truly historic, but something that is also somewhat amorphous from an operational standpoint. Yes, there are things that each side agrees to in the act of canonical communion, but reconciliation is, I would submit, something that was not just a point in time, but rather something that must be fed and cared for over years and decades in order to make the vision of the ever-memorable Patriarch Alexei and Metropolitan Loris a reality. I believe the best way this can be expressed is in the academic realm, with cooperation and interaction between student and professor peers. I hope, too, that my participation today provides something useful in this regard. The topic I have written about is artificial intelligence, also often known by its initials AI. The reality of artificial intelligence is one of those areas where not only the faithful, but in fact almost the entire world is rather unclear. We have the ideas of what artificial intelligence is or will be strongly imprinted in our minds by fictional dystopian novels or films, such as The Matrix and The Terminator. The Church does not speak about this topic in any significant detail or frequency, and thus in the vacuum, the fictional portrayals become the way in which most of the world expects to encounter artificial intelligence. But if we make some relatively small efforts in this regard, we can begin to see that the fictional reality is unlikely to be the actual reality, while at the same time there are major challenges and even greater opportunities for the Church when artificial intelligence is fully implemented. We should be clear, artificial intelligence as a technology is in place now. It is not some far-off, formless abstraction that might affect us or our children or our grandchildren in the future. As Kai-Fu Lee, one of the leading experts in this technology, writes, artificial intelligence powers many of our favorite apps and websites, but in the coming years, AI will be driving our cars, managing our portfolios, manufacturing most of what we buy, and putting us out of our jobs. This, then, is the crux of the issue, the societal effects of massive job loss. If Lee is right, and there is no reason to believe that he, as a recognized leader in the field, is not, society will change significantly over the next 15 years or so. As Lee says elsewhere, with the development of deep learning over the past few years, an era of massive productivity increases, but also widespread disruptions in labor markets and profound socio-psychological effects on people is about to begin. Stephen Taltley writes in Smithsonian Magazine, a well-respected American journal, once it arrives, general AI will begin taking away jobs from people, millions of jobs, as drivers, radiologists, insurance adjusters. This is not an unstudied issue by any means. Books are being published on this topic, documentary films are being made, much graduate work is being done, and there are many multi-billion-dollar companies whose focus and market capitalization are solely based on artificial intelligence. The main premise of my paper is this. The full implementation of artificial intelligence will be on one hand a challenge to the Church, but much more so, it will be an opportunity. A great opportunity, in fact, but one that we need to prepare for now when it is relatively clear what the effects on society will be in the next 15 years. It seems likely that about 40% of employed people will be displaced by artificial intelligence technology when it is fully implemented. The sort of major impact on society that artificial intelligence promises is both rare and extremely significant. Those who are alive now have never experienced a technological revolution such as this. It seems unlikely that people will be left to starve en masse in the streets assuming that governments seek to maximize stability and minimize social unrest and human suffering. Some sort of universal basic income or other social welfare program will almost certainly have to be put in place to minimize the economic shock from widespread employment impacts. This talk is not focused on the political philosophy such programs entail, although I do think that this topic should be studied in depth from this perspective. Rather, I am concentrating here on the reality that great numbers of people will be without a focus in life when artificial intelligence replaces them at their workplace. Work, employment, and efforts at success we make in our careers help in large part to define what personhood is for us on an individual level. Yes, as Orthodox Christians, our faith should be our first and most important defining characteristic. But second is almost certainly the work we do in this life, the sweat of our brow by which we eat our bread. Whether that be working in a factory, driving a truck or other vehicle, logistics work, or perhaps surprisingly to many, white-collar jobs that will disappear with the implementation of artificial intelligence, we often define ourselves in large part by our secular work. Dr. Tom Friars writes in his piece, Work, Identity, and Health, that work is perceived, therefore, as not only providing an income, but giving social legitimacy to our lives. For many, it may be the principal source of personal identity, mediating the sense of being a valued person necessary for self-esteem. A profession or trade gives us an identity as a doctor, a teacher, an engineer, a motor mechanic, a secretary, an electrician, and so on. Without this focus, without this ability to work hard and acquire self-worth from one's work, there will certainly be massive societal repercussions based on a loss of and search for a new identity paradigm following the implementation of artificial intelligence. Some of this could be mollified by outstanding vision and leadership from our political leaders. Perhaps this will be forthcoming, perhaps it will not. But it seems unwise to depend only on secular leaders to deal with what is principally for us as the church a spiritual challenge. Rather, I repeat that we should see the pending artificial intelligence implementation not as a problem at all, but as an opportunity. If we adopt this paradigm, artificial intelligence, as an opportunity for the church, then we must also begin to prepare ourselves accordingly. The societal change promised by this technological revolution is potentially once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to fulfill the Lord's great commandment, Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. Note the use of the verb teach here. This is the only verb used twice in these crucial sentences uttered by the Lord himself. We may assume that this is not a random occurrence, but a well-considered charge, a charge to us as his followers. And thus I would submit that this is exactly where we should focus our preparation in the coming artificial intelligence implementation, on teaching. We need to prepare those that will welcome and catechize the wanderers in the societal wilderness, those who are lost due to the implementation of artificial intelligence. This is not meant to imply that only the ordained clergy should fulfill this duty. Of course, they could, but so could, and I would submit so should, trained catechists. I suggest we essentially prepare an army of catechists to greet the even greater army of that subset of artificial intelligence wanderers that will appear at the doors of our temples looking for answers. Here we also can provide an important outlet for ministry for those who cannot be ordained for canonical reasons, but who nonetheless are called to minister. Christ said, I came not to be ministered unto, but to minister. Ministry is not only ordained ministry, but service that all Christians must provide in emulation of the Lord's service to us sinners. Archpriest Joseph Allen of the Antiochian Church writes in his book, The Ministry of the Church, Image of Pastoral Care, that ministry means service. In a sense, that is all it means. Whether one is in the ministry of the clergy or of the laity, it means only that he is given to serve as one appointed by God. There is no true ministry which is not that of the church, for the church is Christ's body in the world. Within the church, however, it is also clear that such ministry takes a variety of forms. It does not belong solely to either the priest or the layperson. Teaching, however, should not stop at the formation of catechists by any means. Theological education is crucial to managing the wave of newcomers that will arrive due to this technological displacement. Increasing the cadre of clergy that can serve those newcomers will be important. both to oversee the efforts each parish undertakes to serve the newcomers, and also to serve the divine services that should increase greatly in frequency when the large number of neophytes enter the church. And of course, a subset of the newcomers will also pursue theological education, and we need to be ready to welcome them into our seminaries when they are spiritually mature enough to matriculate. Finally, I outline in my paper how parishes might consider their approach to this new opportunity for spiritual growth, and this applies directly to St. Vladimir's. Essentially, this boils down to radically living the gospel personally and radically applying the gospel broadly in society. It is not necessary or desirable to attempt to reinvent the wheel. Let me repeat that. It is not necessary or desirable to attempt to reinvent the wheel. The Lord has already given us the instructions in his gospel. We simply need to be authentic Orthodox Christians, living and applying that gospel as he taught us to, and that is in a radical way. Radical in the sense that we cannot conform with society's expectations for the church. We cannot sit in the corner of society, quietly making a few suggestions from time to time when artificial intelligence is fully implemented. We need to be ready to be at the center of society, living out the gospel as the Lord calls us to, not focusing on the world's expectations, but on the Lord's expectations. If we do this, we will do well. And the implementation of artificial intelligence will be nothing other than a great opportunity for us as the church. An opportunity of the magnitude of the fall of the Soviet Union, perhaps, when again all of society, both in the East and the West, will look to the church for answers on what to do next, on how to live, on what is right and what is wrong. It is my hope that my words here will be accepted for what they are, a few thoughts from a novice. It is also my hope that these thoughts will provide some small contribution to the greater planning that the Church will undertake in preparation for this impending technological revolution in society. I thank you for your time and attention. I'll be happy to take questions now, if there are any. You can leave it going for the questions, I guess. Yes, Marina. Sorry, I got to take out my glasses. I can't see past my nose with those on. So I think, let me repeat your question so that when people see the recording, they can know what it is. We'll ask the kids either to go out or to sit still, just because if everybody's moving, then it ends up being quite a bit of noise. Marina asked about, should people be making career decisions based on the implementation of artificial intelligence? It seems to me that that's wise, right? When it was clear that the Industrial Revolution was happening, the wise people decided that they would not, be joining trade guilds anymore, but they would learn how to fix the machines that were powering the revolution. The thing about the difference in this case is that there are always winners and losers in something like this. It's just the way that it works. That's the way human society works. When the Industrial Revolution happened, some people were winners, other people were losers. But you can do things to help yourself to be in a better position to win. Right? I don't think, for instance, and this is not why I became a priest, but I don't think that artificial intelligence is going to be hearing confessions anytime soon, right? If we fed in the data of the canons to artificial intelligence and then let it hear confessions, it would just be penanceing people 25 years, every single time they came to confession. So that will be the end of that. So I think the priests are safe, but it would be probably wise. For instance, if you had sort of your heart set on a career of driving a truck, to look for something else. That's some pretty low-hanging fruit from artificial intelligence point of view. That's going to go quick. It's I think wise to try to educate ourselves in this way, to read those that are widely cited, rather than just some dude in his basement who's on the internet. He's probably not going to be your best resource for good straight talk about artificial intelligence. But I think that the consensus is that it's going to start with driving trucks and cars, and it's going to go from there into more complex things. But the first it will be a lot of factory work, which is already greatly reduced, right? We've already cut down probably 9 out of 10 people that worked in a factory in the 70s don't work there anymore. It's just going to be less. What's that?
I doubt that some artificial cyber will come to the house and fix your lives, right? So
Right.
plumbers for now, they're saying
I think for repairing things, building houses, that's another story. That if you got the blueprint and you got the stuff, you can do that. So I think that the key is, from an Orthodox point of view, not to panic, right? I think we hear about 40% of people losing their work. Therefore, we should run screaming through the streets waving our arms. But when we're done with that, the same problem is going to be there. So we might as well skip that part and act like Christians. We have nothing to fear. Christ already won the battle, right? This is not a question for us. The question is, how do we get through this life where we are pilgrims so that we can attain the heavenly kingdom? And so I think that we can be wise about, you have to earn your bread, right? I mentioned the sweat of your brow, right? What the Lord told to Adam when he was cast from paradise. We have to choose wisely what we're going to be doing so that we don't choose a career and get educated and trained in something that's just going to disappear in a couple of years. And the more sort of complex decision making that you have to do, or the more interacting with people on a cognitive level that you have to do, probably the better place you are, right? So we tend to think of artificial intelligence like they're going to flip the switch and, people who have thinking jobs are going to be gone because the machine will think better. It's actually not right. It's not right. The machines can make relatively simple decisions. They may have a big database to pull from, but to make complex decisions is not easy. So nurses, doctors should be in pretty good shape. People who work with other people are probably going to be in pretty good shape. If you're a counselor, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Teachers are going to be in good shape to begin with. Professors. That all could change over generations and centuries, but what you don't want to do right now is probably go to truck driving school. That is the one thing I would say is, it's already happening, so that's going to be the first thing. Yeah.
How can we think for our jobs, like what career or something we're gonna make money on, right? Because we do have to support family, church, ministries, so we have to have money. And how can you align with talents that God gives you?
Right, so I think, generally speaking, if we're doing what we love, then we're probably making a decent living because we're going to be good at it and we're going to be diligent at it, and we're going to be recompensed for that. And I think that if we can align our love of what we do, like I wake up every day and I can't believe that I get to do this and somebody's paying me to be a priest, right? It's just like I'm the person who loves what they do. And I think that that's what we should always strive for. And when we have that, I think we do better. But that's not going to be the case with everybody. So we want to choose careers, I would say, in the light of this, that, as we were just talking about, demand complex decision-making processes, and that would be really difficult for a machine to take over from.
I'm thinking that, okay, if people won't be able to make money, there will be a bunch of hungry people. On one hand, it's hard to control hungry people because they can rebel. On the other hand, it might be easy to control hungry people if you give them just barely enough. So I'm not sure that people will be starvation or what. It's hard to imagine because then people
Right. So the question is about what will we do with all these hungry people? And if you've been paying attention, there's been a lot of kind of social experiments in the last 5-10 years on something called the universal basic income. One of the presidential candidates ran on that last time. That was kind of the main plank in his platform. And this has actually been tried in the third world pretty regularly now. If we assume that governments desire to have stability, and they're going to try to avoid chaos, then my guess is that something like that is going to happen. There's going to be some kind of universal basic income. Now that's a whole other ball of wax. That's going to cause all kinds of other problems.
You have to give this, and this, or accept this, and this, so you will be given this.
Well, maybe. I wasn't even thinking about that. If you look at where's our society going? So we're talking about a universal basic income, lots of marijuana shops, and you can kind of see, if anybody's ever read Brave New World, I mean, I'm not a person who's like big into conspiracies and, whatever. But if you read Brave New World, how do they control people in that dystopia? By pleasure. It's not by force. It's by pleasure, right? And so I read that, again, right about the time that marijuana got legalized. And all of a sudden, bells started going off. I thought, oh, I see. This is a path. Is that the decided path? I have no idea. I tend to be not a person who thinks that conspiracies really work well, because if we start with Lisa and you go around the table and just whisper into each other's ear, by the time it gets to Leta, first of all, everybody's told their friend, and it's a totally different story anyway. So, but Father Colin wants to add something here.
I mean, in the past year, we've really seen kind of this playing out. People are out of work and we're getting what they're calling stimulus checks, but really it's just
right.
It's essentially the beginnings of
Exactly.
the UBI.
Yeah.
And what did people do? They burned down most major metropolises. they lost their minds. But how do we then give these people purpose when their purpose has been taken away from them? When what really quells them and not necessarily subdues, but I mean through the sweat of our brow, we are prevented from falling into greater sin. I mean it's a cultivator of virtue. So what do we do with these people when they're cultivator of virtue? Whether or not they're being led to virtue or not, from it is another question. But when that is taken away from them, how do we keep them from, or bring them to the church, bring them to Christ?
Right. So Father Colin's asking, for those who weren't able to hear, what do you when we had this experiment with universal basic income in the pandemic, and I didn't talk about that here, but in my paper I actually went into some depth about how the pandemic is kind of a dry run for this. It gives us a feel of what the chaos is likely to be, but only on a very small scale. The people started to burn down cities and so on and so forth. So this is actually exactly my point. There is only one institution that can step in and give people a purpose, and that's the church. There is no other institution that is purposed for that or has the ability to do that, because everyone will see that it's just shallow muck, that all the rest of that stuff doesn't matter. People get very clear views when they lose their work, when they're not sure if they can feed their family, or if death is at the door. That's when people start to see things really clearly. And I think there's going to be a great societal kind of awakening of clarity. Now, some people will use that clarity to burn down cities. Other people, especially if we're ready for them, will come to God. And I think a lot of people will try that. They will come to the church physically. They will show up. And we're going to have to do a lot. Like when we say for catechumens to go out, it may be that we're taking them from the new church over here, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of people, and we have got to be ready for that. And not just to say, okay, let's learn about the faith. We have to put it into action the way that Christ calls us to put it into action. And I don't mean just like the stuff which is less physical, like love those who hate you. All right, that's not easy, but it doesn't take a lot of physical exertion. I'm talking about Matthew 25 just flat out. We have to be ready to feed people. We have to be ready to clothe people. We have to be ready to help people to find shelter. We are in a unique position. The church was in this exact same position when the Soviet Union fell. All right, I gave this paper in Russia. I didn't go into this in a great deal of in a lot of detail because it can be a kind of a raw thing. There was the person who was the editor of the Journal of Moscow Patriarchate, Sergei Chapnin, not the famous priest Chaplin, but Chapnin. He was not a priest. And he was very outspoken. And he essentially wrote an article, which I think was great, that I alluded to here, but I didn't cite it because I knew it would be kind of lightning. where he said the church blew it when the Soviet Union fell apart. We let the armies, the tactical teams of babushki drive away every girl who came to the church who had a skirt that was too short. We let the priests not be examples of love, right? We didn't put enough structure on the church so that it wouldn't become something with a great influx of money that would look to people from the outside like a place with a great influx of money. We're getting a mulligan here, right? Does everybody know what a mulligan is? When you play golf, you hit a bad shot, you get to do it again. It's called a mulligan. It's a spiritual mulligan here. And I'm not casting dispersions on anybody. It's not like, the church got a 10-year sort of lead time and said, Soviet Union's going to fall apart in 10 years, get ready. It just was boom. Everything was pure chaos. The 90s was insanity. So we get that. We're getting a 15-year lead. And, usually our reaction to that is, well, talk to me in 14 years and 364 days, and then we'll get started. We'll make some plans between here and now. We'll talk about it. We can't miss this chance. This is not just a once in a lifetime. It's maybe once in a millennium opportunity, right? And moreover, if the church does not take advantage of this and get ready to radically live the gospel, not just like, okay, we're Christians on Sunday and we kind of are the rest of the week, like radically live the gospel, then the church might never get another chance. Right? The church may just kind of fade into some catacomb people, and that may be it. It may be that Christ came and prepared us exactly for this. I'm not saying that he did. I'm just saying this is an opportunity that we could easily miss. But if we're ready, if we prepare ourselves, we're going to be able to give a really good answer to God, I think, at the last judgment. So Father Vladimir has had his hand up for a while. I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Father Con made a good point that was relevant to artificial intelligence, and Father Gregory made it irrelevant to artificial intelligence. So I will be less diplomatic, and I'll just say that I disagree with your assumption that the revolution in artificial intelligence will create oversupply of intelligent people driven by some idealistic, things. I think what artificial intelligence can create is just stupid people who care little about important things, whose short memory is very short. Just look at the Google. That's artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it makes into us. So you are not going to meet intelligent people. You are going to meet less than intelligent people, and that's what you will see. And I don't think it's an opportunity. I think it's a challenge, but I'm sorry.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I think probably the way we know artificial intelligence in our lives the best is by YouTube. I would argue the YouTube
There is
algorithm.
TikTok too.
Yeah, the YouTube algorithm is an example of artificial intelligence. What Father Vladimir is saying is that he doesn't think that we're going to get a lot of very educated people showing up at the church, and that's fine. It doesn't matter to me if they're educated or not. We still have to see that their souls are worth trying to save and to help, and that when we have this revolution sort of in society, the church can kind of stand by and let it pass, or I would argue that the church can prepare itself and help these people to find Christ, to find a reason to get up in the morning, as opposed to to go to the marijuana shop or whatever. Did I address what you said, Father? I don't want to talk around it.
Artificial intelligence is used for social control purposes, and it does it very well. It's just
Right.
it's that brave world that
I agree. It's part of the brave new world. The reason that I think that we will find a subset of people who will begin to seek when this happens is because that also happened in the pandemic. So that's my rationale behind that, and it may be completely false. But I think that whenever there's a great upset in society, there's a subset of society that begins to reflect a little bit and say, okay, why? All right, if this is the case, why am I here? Like, if I'm not here to be high and fat, then why am I here? And so I think my assumption is that will happen all the more when artificial intelligence is implemented. Does that make sense?
You have to find those people who survive artificial intelligence, and we can learn from them. Otherwise, I think we don't know how to deal with that.
No, we don't. And that's why I think that the only answer for us as the church is to be authentically the church, right? So if we're going to do anything good when this happens, the best thing that we can do is radically be what we're called to be. And if we do that, then that authentic witness will be, at least for some, attractive.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome. No, that's good. I'm glad that you said that. Father Cullen, and then
So just to kind of follow up on that, I mean, yes, artificial intelligence, at least today, leaves people fragmented, leaves people broken, at least in their attention, and they're unable to really have the mental capacity, at least that people were generations before. But even then, these people, a lot of them are going to be broken from their slumber. I mean, they're kept right now satisfied with artificial intelligence because it's keeping them distracted.
Mhm.
Then you take away their job, and then all of a sudden they're going to realize how critical the little things they were doing, even if it's just pressing that button. They're pressing that button, and then you take away that button. All of a sudden, even Google's not going to save them. They're going to feel broken. I mean, I think one thing that the local Baptist church by my house, what they did in the middle of the winter, is they went to every house in like a 5-block area and gave everyone hats, gloves, like a $20 bill, and it was ridiculous. And they gave people things that they needed in the winter. And I'm not going to go there because I left from Protestantism. I'm not going to become Protestant. Obviously, I saw that and I said, this is a perfect opportunity to make the church known and give people the ability to say, I know this is an option, and obviously they care for me because they met a very basic need. And then we can be prepared once people show up with catechists, with a very versatile liturgical schedule. But even if these people aren't necessarily smart, or even if they're whatever, they still that's something that will speak to everyone. They'll be able to see that, respond.
hopefully on a visceral spiritual level. And if it's not necessarily the smartest people in society, then hopefully they'll say, oh well, the priest here isn't that smart either, so it's perfect. I'll fit in just right. Yeah.
I wouldn't really say that, but even then, the church offers people wholeness. It offers people a way to no longer be fragmented. The church offers us hesychastic prayer. It offers us the writings of the Holy Fathers. It offers us a liturgical cycle that brings us into a fullness of who we are supposed to be as people. I mean, we look at the cross. The cross is the fullness of and the restoration of humanity, and we worship the cross. And so those who come to the church ultimately are either going to learn to be free from this fragmentation, or they're simply going to stop coming. And the people who simply choose to stop coming, there's nothing we can do about that. But we can at least have those who wish to be whole.
To me, I think so. The reason that I wrote about a liturgical cycle and why it's so important, that is the church's authentic teaching tool, right? We think of teaching as there's a teacher and there's students, but actually that's not the way that the church until maybe several hundred years ago, that was the main teaching process that the church had, was the divine services. Generations of saints attained sanctity without being able to read one word. They learned everything that they needed for their salvation in the services. Now, I'm not saying that we should ban books and not let people do that. What I'm saying is that especially when people are hurt, when they need healing, that balm of the services, it can't be replaced by anything, right? It's so important. So I think that it's going to be really important for the church to meet this challenge with an absolutely full liturgical cycle. Liturgy every day. I mean, we will need to do that because you know what? Every day people aren't going to be at work, right? Sunday's important. Sunday has a meaning for us as the day of the resurrection. But if you don't work any day, right? But you give people a reason to get up in the morning, come to church, light the candles, read, sing in the choir, participate in the divine services. It's a reason to not just engage with the latest virtual reality head goggles. And I think that we have to be ready to do that. Was it Letta? Yeah, and then Father Vladimir.
But can't we take for a good and use for church?
Of course.
The technique, whatever stuff.
The church always uses technology for good, right? We look at what technology is and we try to use it to sanctify, right? So the internet has a lot of bad, but there's a lot of good on the internet too, right? The church is on the internet because people are on the internet, right? How we will engage with artificial intelligence, I don't really know, because it's really hard to understand how that trajectory is going to work. But wherever a new technology is implemented, if it's not immoral from the church's point of view, and most technologies are relatively judgment-free, they can be used for bad or they could be used for good, then the church will be there trying to attract people to Christ. So I saw a hand over here. Father Vladimir, yes.
Another challenge with artificial intelligence is it's not just instrument, it's not just technology, it's a worldview, and the worldview is transhumanism.
Right.
And
Let me repeat that so people they say.
you can't just say, well, that's a technology, it can be good or it can be bad. Because any technology, like a hammer, it's a tool, so you can use it for good or bad.
Right, you can build a house or you can kill your neighbor.
I'm
Yeah.
skeptical that living in this society, you can just have that choice of having artificial intelligence as a pure technology. No, you have to take the entire package. And the package includes that worldview with it, of course, is spiritual, but not in the way that we want to be spiritual.
Right. So it may be that it turns out that there are major moral problems or philosophical problems that would preclude us from Christians as in participating in this technology. I think someone smarter than me is going to have to figure that out, and I'm not sure anybody really knows exactly, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that it's a legitimate statement, and I think totally accurate actually, that this worldview is going to, we may be the place where people can escape from that worldview, right? The church is not by its very view anti-technology, but it's against technology which dehumanizes, right? It's against technology which tries to enslave, right? So if the technology is morally neutral, then we're going to probably be there trying to use that for good. But if the technology is morally corrupt, then there's no way for us to be there, and we would be the sort of place where you retreat from that, a place where you don't have to engage in that immorality. Marina, and then I think Michael wants to say something.
Kind of what Vladimir's talking about. So if we know that this, like Father Colin said, breaks people's mind, even this fragments of reality or parallel realities. So what the church can do to prevent it, especially, okay, maybe I don't do that already, but for newer generation, can we do some prevention, not just already dealing with the result, but how can we prevent young people, kids from being broke? It's easy to work with old people and when they're already broken. And can they even point of
So how to keep people from being broken by this technology? To me, the answer is always the same in this regard, is we need to empower our children to be authentic Christians. If they're Orthodox Christians who are believers and understand what their faith is, understand what's good and what's bad, then whatever happens in the world, whatever happens to them when they leave our house, they'll be able to use that filter that they have and say, I can let that in, that, no, I can't let that in. So we can't think for the children, right? We can't, even if we want to be a helicopter parent, eventually the helicopter is going to crash, right? I mean, we're not going to be able to do that. And so it's much more important to empower them to be authentic Orthodox Christians so that they're able to filter out what is inappropriate for a Christian.
I was thinking about practical thing. It's all kind of theoretical, but practical. Maybe some examples of what church can do for
Well, those two things don't always go together. Being good and Christian, they should, but they don't always. I think one of the things we can do is educate our children. So I think we should build a school. Wait, yeah, we are building a school. I think this is really important. We need to provide a refuge from kids. Yes, we do that too, but for our kids. The refuge from the kids is a different story. But we need to have the opportunity for folks because, as with most things, society and the public schools have a certain worldview, and the schools have always been used for that. And it used to be that our worldview more or less aligned with the schools, so that was okay. But it didn't really bother us. But as our worldview begins to deviate, or really we didn't change, but as the world starts to deviate from our worldview, then less and less we'll be comfortable with that kind of a situation. And so I think we're going to see a great flowering of parish schools, parochial schools in the Orthodox Church, because parents will more and more understand the need for authenticity for their children, and they'll more and more understand that it's not just a question of like the present sexual politics in the schools. That's going to be nothing compared to when this happens. So I think that this is another way that we need to get ready now. We need to be ready now to educate the next generation, right? The Lord is giving us a baby boom in our parish. I kind of lost track, like 8, 10, 20, I don't know how many women are pregnant now, but that's great, thank God. But we have to be ready to educate those children, right? When I went through the public schools, of course there were some objectionable things, but it was essentially a Christian upbringing, right? That's what we had in the 70s and 80s, and before that. But it just deviates more and more now from that, so it's time for us to step up, and that's one of the ways we have to be ready. Father Colin? Oh, Michael never got the chance.
I was just going to say that in terms of the technology, like shattering people's minds and having a bad worldview that comes along with it, like we have that already. We've had that for
Yeah, we've been working on that for a while.
many
Yeah.
years with computers and the internet. So it's in some ways it's optimistic. Say like we can look at AI and see all the negative that comes with it and acknowledge that, but also be able to see either opportunity to carve out our own slice or at the very least opportunity to be saved through resisting all the negative that
Right.
just like we have today.
I think that's a good point, and I think we probably don't, or I can say I don't understand exactly how this is going to work enough to be able to say we could kind of exist on the periphery of that, or like we don't touch. And I think that Father Vladimir is suggesting that it's probably a we don't touch, and I'm guessing that's probably what it is too. I just don't know enough about it yet in the way that it's implemented. But in the end, we have to understand the world has its own values. The world has its own plan, right? Rarely the church's worldview and the world's view are going to align. We happen to have lived in a time when that more or less, like our generation, us old people here, we more or less lived in a generation where those two things were pretty closely aligned. So we kind of got real used to the fact that, well, like, okay, educate my kids, I don't care, because it's more or less, I can filter out a few things that you tell them that it doesn't matter. But that's, again, we're going on a straight line. The church doesn't change, but we have society doing this. So if we're still expecting that we're going to get the same sort of Judeo-Christian values if we send our kids to public school in our days, or in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, that's probably not a wise guess, right? That's just one of the things is education, but that's why we're building a school, not because of artificial intelligence, because the world's view and the church's view are deviating more and more. We're not changing, but the world is changing, and there's going to be a subset and hopefully a majority of parents who sort of say, you know what, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable putting my kid into the school. And if they are, that's fine, we're going to work with them, but we at least want to provide the option. Father Colin.
So, commenting on practical steps that could be done with this stuff, I think all of this technology really kind of came on and was accepted without much thought as to what it would do to people. There's not really much in terms of data or in terms of analysis of this. It's just kind of looked at as, at least our society looked at as a good, I think some really good books looking at technology and how it's
Yeah, I often, it's a very good point, and I often chuckle when people say, oh, you know, I'm worried that I'm being watched by the government. And then they take out their iPhone. I'm like, come on, you know, like you're volunteering to be watched, right? So we sort of gave into this, I think, because we saw technology generally as a society as just an absolute good, right? It's more, there's more productivity, there's more, it's all positive, right? We see it as all positive, and I'm not here to say to you it's all negative. It's not, but I think we have to be really wise consumers of everything that's in our lives. We can't delegate the decisions that we have to make to somebody else, to society, right? It doesn't mean they're out to get us. Christians have always lived, except for this little time from like right before World War I until now, have always lived in society, but not necessarily engaged with all of society's aspects, right? And I think that that's something we have to understand. We may get to this point, to this place, where we sort of have to say, well, you know, we can participate in this piece, but we're not going to touch that piece. That's not for us. And it's going to be couched in the AI implementation as a technology. So it's important for us not to sort of say technology equals good. That's a 50s, 40s, 1800s way of thinking about things, right? We need to break that paradigm and be much more scrupulous about just accepting stuff, right? We shouldn't be hypervigilant. We shouldn't be, you know, we have enough conspiracy theories, thank you, the internet, but we need to be wise. And how do you get wise from a Christian point of view? You live a Christian life. You live a sacramental life. You live a life where you're seeking transformation. This is how we can best protect ourselves, not by some other kind of competing technology, but by what the Lord already gave us 2,000 years ago, to live the life that He's calling us to. And if we do that, then we're more or less, I think we're going to be okay, right? They didn't wipe them out in the first centuries. Maybe we'll have a great persecution again, but there's no reason to necessarily think that's the case. But we need to be wise. And the only way we can do that is by living an Orthodox life. Marina?
So then, I actually agree with what you were calling it. It might be the point that we don't touch it. Otherwise, especially for kids, it's always in your face. How can you have to be safe than to ignore it or something, or
Right.
to filter it so well. So then I thought, okay, maybe they will come to church and church will say, look, you can live without it. So maybe all of us should start doing it.
I
Because
didn't
it's
say don't touch because
I also
it
did not
touches,
say don't touch it.
it
no, it's
touches
not
you.
but
It touches you.
Yeah.
Well,
It touches you. No,
You
it
don't
can't.
want it, but
I'm saying,
Cut it off. You said cut it off.
I'm saying moderate it. Moderate it. Right now, most of us, if we're willing to admit it, are addicted to technology.
Yeah, so
And we
then
need to learn how to not be addicted to technology, but quite frankly, in our society, you cannot completely cut, you can't, most jobs you can't even hold without some degree of involvement in technology. So it's just understanding what we need in order to live and then leaving it at that. So not letting it get past what is necessary. And that's probably going to have some involvement. So we're going to have to touch it, but being able to have some sobriety and stop and before it takes us over.
In the end, Christians will be part of the world, but we have to not be consumed by the world. I think it just keeps coming back to this authentically living as an Orthodox Christian, not kind of doing that. And I don't mean being fanatics. There's no salvation in fanaticism. There's just not. And the fathers say that with one voice. But to be authentic, to really live as Orthodox Christians, to live a Christ-centered life, to really live our faith, we'll be walking with God. God will help us to make these decisions. And of course the church will investigate this and will have statements about it, just like it has about all kinds of technology and all kinds of things that happen in the world.
so maybe then even in being in the bar, you can show people that yeah, you can survive. It's still liturgy you can do without heat. You can survive or with minimal heat without any technology.
And we like it.
If you're focusing on just, I think it's like an example.
Well, no, I think that we have to take the reality and we have to react to it in an authentically Christian way, right? So we had a pandemic, right? You can argue about how virulent it was and whatever, like those things, we're not going to square that circle. We had a pandemic, we had an issue. Church wasn't big enough. What are we going to do? We're not ready to build a new church yet. We got this space. Okay, I think that was a good, moderate, reasonable decision, right? Was it perfect? Of course it wasn't perfect. We didn't really think through exactly how cold it was going to be here, but nonetheless, we never missed a liturgy, right? In the whole pandemic, we never missed a liturgy. And the church will not stop serving liturgy when AI comes. Even if you can watch it in virtual, goggles, the church will continue to be authentically the church. And the more that we can be close to the church, the more that we can live that authentic life too, then I think the less real danger there is for us. The more we sort of cede our wisdom or our decision-making processes to the society writ large, then the harder it's going to be for us to live as authentic Christians, because there's going to be that dichotomy, that conflict that is built into that. So we got to be close to God. We have to live as Christians. And if we do that, then I think we're going to be mostly okay. We'll make some mistakes, but hopefully we'll learn from that, right? The church is perfect. It's a divine organization. But the church has flaws in that it's also a human organization, and humans are not perfect, right? So those who manage the church will make mistakes. But if we learn from those mistakes, hopefully only make it once, right? Just like in our personal lives. Okay, we make a mistake. Certainly the Lord will forgive us when we repent. But, to make it 10 times in a row, maybe we're not getting the message. Same thing with the church and society. We might make a misstep, but we're going to try to recover that and not repeat that.
Talking about the church, so the church is doing by the Holy Spirit, so we have to believe that the decisions of our hierarchs are Holy Spirit driven. So we have these instructions, and we think that eventually they will give some instruction to the parishes on this one.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's the tradition of the church. Whenever there's an issue in society, the church is going to speak out on that issue. So that will happen in this case too. And I think what we've seen in the history of the church, when the church is under pressure, and I don't mean persecution, I just mean when there's pressure, that God's grace shines forth even more, right? This is where we get this choir of saints, when the church has this pressure. We wonder sometimes why there are so many bishop saints. During the times of the Trinitarian controversies and the Christological controversies, the tradition of the church was, if a bishop died without apostatizing, without leaving the true faith, they were considered a saint. Boom, that's it. Then no miracles, no nothing. If they could live without apostatizing from the true faith, then they were counted as a saint. Right? And so I don't know that we'll get back to that point. That was a specific point in time. This is a technology which will be implemented on society. That was a theological thing, but I just think it's interesting for us to see that when there are great struggles, the Lord also provides more grace. And so we should never fear. Our reaction should always be to turn more towards God when there's pressure, when there's struggle. And if we do that, I think we're going to be okay. We have to be wise. It's not good to be dumb. But if we're wise and we ask God's help and we live authentically Christian lives, I think we're going to do okay. Thank you, everybody. I see that we're done. I really appreciate your time. I hope this was interesting for you.